Hey.
We were just talking about it's funny. Probably what we're going to talk about today. We are just talking about like catching up, right? And some
Mhm.
stuff that I'm trying to like really push on the online side that we're adopting in the brick and mortar Park City Fit,
Mhm.
and talking about some things you have coming up at your gym. Um, it's a time of change, huh?
There's a great book out there that says what got you here won't get you where you need to go, or something along those lines.
Yeah,
And so the theme today are things that you and I value, probably lessons that we've learned the hard way, things that at one point we probably weren't doing, but now that I think this way, I can't think another way. Meaning that I can't at this point like eliminate some of these things because I found that it's really valuable. So
and
we
we're
haven't.
talking in the frame of owning running a gym.
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah,
things that coaches or gym owners should be doing but aren't. That's our theme. Now I tried to make the title
yeah,
as catchy as possible, but it's pretty broad. So that could be from a standpoint of what's happening on the gym floor and as specific as program design or how the hours flowing in group or private coaching,
yeah.
or that could be from a business side as well. So when I share that with you, what popped into your head?
You know what's funny is when you sent that over, I was all in because I think, we've done the one on the 3 biggest mistakes we've
Uh
made as
huh.
gym owners, and I think that these could sort of mirror one another in a way. But,
Probably so.
we've talked about other things, and I sometimes have a really hard time with this topic, and I think the reason why is historically, I've been really resistant to um, all of the this probably started to pop up, I would say, maybe 8 or 9 years ago, I think. Yeah, probably 7, 8 years ago. There is this sort of season where a lot of these, sort of the sprout companies popped up as a way to help gyms run, right? And they were a variety of different people that were giving people business advice on how to run your affiliate or your gym most effectively, right?
Mm-hmm.
We know what I'm talking
Mm-hmm.
about. And I really disliked them, and I think part of the reason why is, I haven't been one for a really structured approach ever. I just generally don't like that. And I think some of what, at least in that season, I ran into was this mentality of sort of a one size fits all approach of, well, if you want to run an effective gym, it has to look like this.
Yeah.
Like you have to do these 5 things in order to run a successful gym. And I just don't think that's true because I think demographic plays a massive role in people running a successful gym. Um, so here's the first thing that I would do.
I have so much to comment on that too.
Oh my gosh, right? So here's the first thing that I would do that I don't know if people ask this question, and I have answered this the same way from day one. This is from, and how crazy is this, Spencer? So technicality, on a technicality, do you know what today is? April 28th.
No, what is it?
Today is our actual 15-year anniversary at Park City
Oh
Fit.
man, congratulations.
Crazy, right? Thanks, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. So 15 years, right? And from the second that I have received this question, my answer is the same. People will ask me, "Hey, Chris, I'm opening a gym or rebranding or whatever.
Uh-huh.
Do you have any advice?" First, first thing people need to ask themselves is what kind of culture do you want to create in your gym?
Dude, that's so good.
And I think everything that you decide from that will stem from that. So, is it okay if I elaborate? I'm talking a lot.
Dude, go for it. Because I'm gonna say stuff that'll just make you talk more. So just go and I'll chime in.
So, I'll try to keep it brief, right?
Buckle in everybody. It's three
Here
hours.
we
About to
go. 5-point harness. So what I mean by culture, it helps you answer the question, do you want to run a large facility with, five, is your goal to have 500 members? You're going to have the space and the equipment for that. Do you want to run a small group training program where your facility only does small group training and it's capped at 6 people per class? Do you want to run an open gym only? Do you want to
Mhm.
have a highly competitive, performance oriented program? Do you want to cater toward masters? Do you want to offer a variety of services and try to reach out to the broader community and not pigeonhole yourself? So, should you brand yourself as a CrossFit gym, or should you be a CrossFit facility that is called something else? Um, do you want to have a really small group of professional trainers that you have very few employees, but they're very, very highly qualified? Do you want to have a lot of employees that kind of have, other things going on? I think asking that question originally, like, what kind of culture do I want to create, will set you up for success to help answer all those other questions: facility size, equipment, pricing, group class size, how many coaches I need. Am I going to enjoy doing this every day? When I walk into the gym and to do my job, am I stoked to be there, or am I dragging my feet? So, anyway, that's step one.
It's so good. So I've thought about this a lot too, and I agree with that. And I for anybody that listens to this, you create a culture whether you want to or not. Like the fact that people are getting together means that there's a culture. So if even if you decide like you know what Chris said is dumb, and you have people that are gathering together, you have a culture. And as human beings, whenever somebody enters into any type of new social environment, the first thing they do is they look around and they say, what do these people care about? And as a default for a CrossFit gym, unfortunately, most places, as you look around, you say, okay, these people really prioritize like being super dramatic after a workout is over by how hard the workout was. And so if I want to fit in here, I have to also do that too. So the tricky part is like you could be saying all these things. You could take the time to write a mission statement and vision what you care about. But if you're still doing the workouts and you celebrate people completely obliterating themselves day in and day out, what you wrote down means nothing. It means nothing. And I think that there's one thing to be like, hey, this is the type of business that I want to be. And it's another to take a hard look at what people look like day in and day out, how they're progressing. Do you have somebody that's 200 pounds overweight and they've been 200 pounds overweight for 10 years with you? What you think you're doing is not what actually you're doing. And I think
Mhm.
that's a really hard pill to swallow. And then back to what you were saying before about, these so-called experts that are teaching us how to do business. Uh, I, I,
Which
I,
I am not an expert at business,
yeah,
trust
yeah,
me.
yeah.
But
But you know what? 15 years plus 14 years, like, yeah, starting a business from scratch. I'd argue that you and I have an MBA. You know,
yeah,
maybe
yeah,
maybe not officially through a school, but it's like, you
I'll
know,
go with that. Yeah.
yeah, we've learned some hard business lessons. But I think that the difference between 15 years of figuring out this stuff with trial and error, if someone had been through that whole journey with you and then came alongside you and be like, Chris, what do you think about this? You would probably be a lot more receptive to that. I think the reason that these companies rub us the wrong way is one, the personality and the bravado and um, the way that they have to claim that they're an expert at this turns me off immediately. And then, like you said, they don't know me. So it's like they're giving generic business advice, but it's not specific to the culture that I've tried to create.
Yeah.
And that's tricky. It's almost like, and I don't know how you feel about this, but in Christianity, it's if and there's great reasons to be missionaries and spread the gospels to complete stranger. But I can guarantee that if you were my friend for 15 years and then you came up and you're like, "Hey man, I got this really great secret and I've been waiting for the right time to share it with you. You and I, we've been friends for a long time. Let me tell you about this thing." I would be so much more receptive than a complete stranger be like, "Hey, do you have a faith, dude? Can I tell you my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ?" It's like even though the information is
Yeah,
life
yeah.
changing, it's the it's the delivery, it's the personality. There's
The
just a
earned
lot that goes
trust.
into it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I get it, man. I see the
So I had to
parallel
go off there.
100%. No,
I had to meet your rant and take it a
no,
hundredfold.
I agree though, and I think I ask myself this question too, right? I still think it's interesting because on that same thread of thought, I still think we're really young in this process, right? So from the time that you and I started our gyms,
Mhm.
I think we were doing the best with the information that we had and the passion that we had.
Totally, man.
Right? And so
Totally.
that's evolved over time. And we've talked about this so many times before, is that question of, hey, can we do this for 10 or 15 years? Or how do we really, let's be honest, like how do we really build, if this is the culture you want to create, how do we really build a high performing athlete? Nobody does that. Let's just call it out. Everybody that you guys see at the games has come from a previous athletic experience. They did not go into like this vacuum with they were, this just perfect human has
Mhm.
never done any training protocol and some phenomenal coach, some brilliant programmer grabbed him and was like, these are the things you need to do that will get you to the games. That's never happened, at least to my knowledge, right?
Yeah.
You start to see more of these kids coming onto the scene, but I think the question is still to be determined. What's it going to look like in 5 or 10 years for them? You know, so nobody's done that, right?
Yeah.
So over the course of time, I think my vision and my passion um, for a method that we love and the way that I want that to serve the community and the culture and the way I want it to last has really changed. It's evolved. So it's a difficult, like you sort of have to tiptoe your way around and really have to ask yourself these questions of, hey, this information, this business advice over here might not be bad, right? I think there's some valuable tenets of running a successful business, right? But
Mhm.
maybe not all of that applies to me. And I think I get super resistant when it becomes that approach of no, these tenets are what you have to follow in order to be successful.
Yeah.
Um,
Now I'll tell you this, the way that I've reconciled that because I still need, business acumen, and and I've realized that there are principles that I can't argue with. It's
yeah,
just the method that I choose to use is something that we could argue until the end of time.
great point. Yeah.
So it's like when I hear something, it's like, man, we're oversaturated with that stuff. And when I hear it, I think I have to like take it through a filter. It's like, okay, you're
Yeah.
saying that. What's the thing that he's really trying to say that's a pretty good principle? And I think that you know my so I'll tell you my first one because you kind of lobbed it up. But
Yeah. I was just going to say, what is yours?
so I think that you have to, and this is a method, right? So it's arguable how you go about it, but it's based on a principle that I don't think you can argue. But I think coaches and business owners need to think through the journey of like your client, like the thing,
I'm gonna write that down. I
dude.
love
The
that.
the
I
thing that
love that.
we're the thing that we're selling is really complex. I mean, it's a service, but it's an experience. There's a product in terms of education. Like there's so many ways, and that should be encouraging, I think, to anybody that's listening to this
Yeah.
because there's so many ways that you can go about it based on your experience, based on mine. I mean, I think that's the way that we determine like, hey, these are the things that we're going to try to put into this immersive membership that we've created. uh and the principle is this: people change over time.
Yeah.
Nobody can argue that. I mean, you could say no, no one changes over time, but you can also take that and look at like what that life quality would look like. And even if that is possible, it's not ideal. And so I
Yeah.
think this responsibility that we have is to think through, okay, when somebody starts, this is what we would want it to look like. And 6 months in, like maybe these are some things that would be important, and so on and so forth. And then, we've had lots of great conversations around, hey, if you have somebody for 15 years, at some point, did they just shift into neutral?
Yeah.
And the answer is maybe in some parts of their life, but their life is still evolving.
Yeah.
And so I think, like working through that is one of the best creative exercises a business owner or, a head coach can go through, because without that, and here's the mistake that I think is being made, to have this restaurant where all you serve is a cheeseburger. It could be the best cheeseburger of all time. But if that's all you serve, then at some point people are going to they're going to want some other recipe because their life demands it. And
Uh-huh.
if you're not prepared or equipped to have thought through what those ingredients might look like for that recipe, they're gone. And it's not because you didn't make a great cheeseburger. You're a world-renowned cheeseburger chef,
Yeah.
but a cheeseburger just isn't what they wanted. I don't know if that's a great analogy, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think yeah, and it's what's funny is I think people will wanna push back on that, and I think they'll wanna argue that there is and I think there's a difference here. I think they're gonna wanna argue that simplicity kind of, like, reigns king. So, if you, like, let's go with cheeseburger mentality, think like In and Out. They serve cheeseburgers and milkshakes, right? Like, the menu is pretty limited. When you think about Apple, the menu's fairly limited. Your options, like you've got 3 choices. It's more now, right? But,
Hmm.
so I think people like to find this comfort in simplicity, and I think that the trick there is that just because there are, um, maybe ways to cater toward the different variations of people or how people evolve, because I totally believe that happens, it doesn't mean that it doesn't have to be simple. Right? So that complexity of how people change, the way that we give them the programming, the way that we start to think about what their journey looks like, I do think it can be broken down into a simple approach, but it doesn't mean it's easy to get there. You really have to think through what that looks like for them. Um,
For sure.
but
And
yeah, I agree.
and yeah, I like an elegant solution as much as anybody else.
Yeah. People are messy though.
But it is exactly what I was going to say. Like real life just doesn't work like changing one variable.
Yeah, and maybe it's a difference between also a product and a service, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. And I think that's where the service comes in. And
Yeah.
it's not necessarily that we need to re-engineer the product. Like, yeah, maybe the product's just fine, but it's the way you come alongside someone,
There you go. Yeah, yeah.
um, might be the might be the thing that, as you're like mapping this out, it's where you focus, not,
Yeah.
oh, if we're talking exercise, not like, oh, we need to completely abandon this product. Like, no, that's probably not the answer, but consider these different phases in your life. Consider when Rourke was a newborn baby and what the limiting factor was for you
Yeah.
versus when you were wrestling versus when, today you turn 15 years old as a business.
Yeah.
It's probably not just the one product that needs to be completely revamped. It's probably like other factors and considerations that go into it. So
Yeah.
that whole thing I just said can be overwhelming, but I think the encouraging part is because it's so multifaceted, it means that you have carte blanche to approach it however you think is fit. And because you own the business, well, you get to call the shots. It's one of the best parts of
Yeah.
one of the best parts of being in charge.
Oh, it's great, man. I have a second one before I forget it.
Okay.
Okay. And I think people might be I think people will be like, "What do you mean? Like, this doesn't give me anything. Like, what's the thing I need to do to be successful?" But second thing, right? Um, you need to ask yourself, this is a hard question. You need to ask yourself, is running a gym something you want to do for the rest of your life? Or is it something that you plan on doing as a side gig?
Mm,
Those are like really different approaches, man.
that's
Because you
so
and I
good.
have talked about this too. We've we kind of crossed that bridge. And there was that moment, I think for both of us, for those of you guys that don't know, both Spencer and I decided to purchase a building, right? So like you purchased a building in Dallas, I did in Park City. I would hesitate to say that either are very affordable markets.
Yeah.
Both are pretty expensive. Um, but that decision was based off of answering the question, is this something I plan on doing as a profession for another 10 or 15 years?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I was talking to a guy that is considering getting into the uh, fitness industry, and he's an awesome dude. Is in ministry, so he's in pastoral care, and is just like stoked about fitness. And so
Yeah.
we've had lots of interesting conversations, and I think that there's, I mean, take what we were just talking about a second ago. It's like the client's journey. It's like your own journey can have lots of different twists and turns. You don't have to own a building. You don't have to immediately quit your job, burn the bridges, and go full in.
Yeah.
Uh, but I, but we know that in order to be successful, there are things that you have to do on a daily basis. And if you have something else that's commanding your attention, it's going to be more challenging for you to progress like you potentially could if you weren't distracted with something else. And I think that, there can be physical distractions like, hey, I have another job. But I think one of the biggest mental strains is that thought that creeps into the back of all of our heads that are in the fitness industry that says, is this what I should be doing?
I think
And it,
everybody asks that.
yeah,
Everybody, and so I think it's worth that because when and I guess the difference is that it's not a punch in and punch out job. It's not
hmm,
a I get a paycheck every 2 weeks. If you own your own business, if you're an entrepreneur, you got to find a way to make it work. You got to find a way to pay the bills. You're the guy or gal that's on the hook. It's just like the way that it works. So
yeah,
because of that, and I don't think there's a right or wrong approach to this. I think people could say, "Hey, this is going to be a side gig, and we're going to have
totally.
multiple people own this thing, or this is what I'm going to do forever." I think either is okay and can be done, but our expectations have to be met accordingly for what that might look like.
Yeah, absolutely. And I heard this just recently that, some, it's probably like ancient Greek or something like that. Some rough translation of the people of Israel is the people who wrestle with God, which means like
Dude.
they're constantly wondering, like, is God real? And I think you can take that same mentality into this. Is like, is this what I should be doing? I ask myself that all the time, and I've been
Yeah.
doing it for a long time. But what's nice is that at this point, when I ask myself that question, the answer has gotten stronger of an affirmative than it was 12 years ago. It's like, is this what I should be doing?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, it is. Okay, back
And then
back to work. Yeah,
yeah, and then what's cool is it kind of ties into what you were saying. Now, maybe it's not so much the product that I'm changing tremendously, but it's how I serve that product. It's like, okay, if
totally.
this is what I am going to do for the next 10 years, 15 years, what do I want that to look like? The culture, like how do I create? I mean, what we're talking about is, oh, we restoring connection. Did you see that? Hey, are we back? I don't know. Are we back? Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's kind of cutting in and out just a little bit. I don't
Weird.
know what happened. You were flowing, and then
It's flowing, and then it
all
cut
of a
me off. Am
sudden,
I back? Am I still choppy?
I can hear you just fine now.
Oh, great. Okay. But yeah, anyway, it can tie into the culture and the way that we serve people. Um, but the fact that you know that, and you know that it's going to be more a long-term thing, I think really forces you to ask those questions a little bit more than when we might be having that mentality of, oh, like this is kind of a side gig. If I want to sell my portion off, I can, or ABC. It's just, I think it's a little different on how we can approach it.
Do totally. And yeah, I think that change in perspective, if it's like, hey, this is really just a temporary stay, I think the the depth of how you dive is different.
Yeah.
And it's not right or wrong, but it's like, I have enough ADD that if I had, 3 other jobs, it would keep me from doing this one as well as I could do.
Yeah. I struggle with that very admittedly between Park City Fit and the online stuff. And I
Mhm.
really try to look at it as an extension. Like I really try to look at the online that I do as an extension of the brick and mortar and the culture that I want to create and things like that. But I will tell you right now that if I had one of those, it would probably look different, you know?
Yeah.
And it's funny that you say like the journey, the customer journey or the client's journey, because I was actually talking to my trainers about that the other day. And I said, hey guys, this is not something I'm good at. I'm just not. I'm not a person that needs to have kind of my hand held and be guided through this process and like, okay, now that we're here, we're going to do this and not. But I don't think many people are like that. I really don't. I think people like the pat on the back and like, hey, Spencer, how we doing? We're 3 months in, and like, what can we do to make this better for you? And I've noticed that, um, you're seeing some good results, and maybe there's this cool nutrition thing that we could follow, or maybe there's this other way to approach programming. And hey, here's where I've seen your progress. Like, I don't need my hand held. I'm
Mhm.
just not I am like I there's this piece of me that wants to tell all those people like, "Hey, go to work. Like just do the work and just show up." That's all. So like I get frustrated when I think about that, but I know that's not right. I
Well,
know that's
it's not common. It's
Yes.
not
So
common.
good call. Yeah. But I do know though that because I look at that and I assign that mentality to others, I
Mm.
am missing a piece of that service both in the gym and online. I know I am because I don't have that mentality. So I need to kind of shift that and think about, okay, well, who should I surround myself with that can make that better? Because I ask my trainers here, hey, if there's a better journey we can have for our clients,
Mhm.
let me know because I'm real bad at that.
Well, and I've thought a lot about that too, and I abhor the concept of, like, hand-holding because I think this is kinda what you're saying, I wanna equip and create people that are autonomous. I wanna create people that, like, don't need me at all, the same way that my dad, every night growing up, my dad's a dentist, would make sure that I brushed my teeth,
Yeah.
and I did not like that process, but Chris, gosh darn it, I brush my teeth every night.
Yeah.
And through that journey early on, I realized, well, because I want to keep my teeth, I just so happen to do this thing that I don't really, get any pleasure from.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if this process that we're describing, like it can and that's a great thing to recognize, like, hey, I don't want this process to look like we're holding your hand or that we're getting you to do something that you don't. I like to imagine this much more romantic notion of, hey, we're storming the beaches. I need you right here with me. This will
Yeah.
happen. This thing that you want, like it will happen. But I need you right there with me. And so we're more peers in this thing as we've burned the boats and we're going in this direction,
Yeah.
not me dragging you along. And so
Yeah, yeah.
you know what I mean? So I think some
Yeah,
of,
that's a
and
great
then,
call.
a lot of these, because I don't have it figured out, but I've figured out that if I was your coach and you were my client, a lot of these conversations will be like, "Hey, Chris, you good? Just calling check in on you." And you'd say, "Yeah, I'm good." Be like, "All right, rock on." And that
Yeah.
would pretty much be it.
Yeah.
But I think that's where, it's tricky because, offering to be a listening ear at times, when you've done that for me, like, even though I don't need my handheld,
Yeah.
it is really positive for me. And I think that's the point, is not, hey, you're not, because something that I hated during COVID is someone was like, hey, if y'all don't have a group class and if somebody's not like forcing me to come, I'm just not going to exercise at all. It was like, what? You're not going to do it at all?
Yeah.
And it just made me think like, oh, I think that was a big catalyst for me to talk through this. It's like, well, we need to come up with some process where like people are self-sustaining, They just
Yeah.
show up because they like it here, not because like they
Yeah.
need it to live.
It's interesting too, though. Like, so let's kind of frame a reference, right? Perfect.
Mhm.
Our personal experience. I don't need that when it comes to training, right? Like, I just am wired that way, especially
Uh-huh.
the wrestler mentality. Like, I'll outwork you. I don't care. Like, I don't care. It's just like the way I grew up, right?
Uh-huh.
Um, but now check it out. You start talking about things that I'm a little less secure about, things that I need accountability on, things that you and I have had a number of conversations on the phone.
Mm.
Hey, Spencer, here's what I've got going on at the gym. I don't know if this is gonna work, you
Yeah.
know? And like I need someone like you there to kind of
Yeah.
help guide me through that.
That's a great point.
Right. Where other people might be like, hey, Chris, it's a business. Like, put your big boy pants on and get to work. I'm not wired like that. You
Uh-huh.
know, like so it's funny that I'm critical of that of some of whether it would be like our online or brick and mortar members. Maybe what they need is exactly that. Maybe for them the training thing is where I just need your accountability, bro. Like, I will show up if you know that I'm supposed to be there.
Yeah.
But if I don't have that, I'm not going to be successful. And they own it because they know it. Where maybe on the business life, they're like, I got this. I
Yeah.
don't need anybody's help.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to think about any individual. Like, hey, every person has something in their life that they're lights out in.
Yeah.
That if you gave them a compliment, like here's an example. If I gave you a compliment about, hey man, great job working out this week, you'd be like, yeah, I know. It's just it's just who I am. That compliment means nothing to you
Yeah.
because it's so established in like who you are. And I think it's a cool perspective to be like, hey, everybody I'm talking to, there's something in their life that they're lights out with. It just so happens that fitness isn't it for them. So
Yeah.
this identity that I have where it's like I can't not exercise every day, they don't have that. But
Yeah.
they do have that somewhere. And so, it just becomes like this really cool mantle of responsibility in the same way that you just described. If somebody were to come to me with a thing that I'm really insecure about, man, you'd want them to be truthful with you, but you'd want them to guide you with some grace and some understanding, more listening, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
It's
Man,
good.
it is. All
That's
right.
that's that's a good thing to recognize. I just listening to you. Yeah.
Do you have a second, like a hard second, of something a gym owner should do? They're missing right now.
Well, yes, I think that gym owners should meet with their staff way more than they probably think that they should.
Man, I'd love for you to elaborate because I go back and forth on this. I go back and forth on frequent trainer meetings and not. And I sometimes wonder if in those meetings I'm beating a dead horse because I'm more and more passionate about facilitating them
Uh huh.
to be the hero. And kind of like we talked about, I'd
Yeah.
rather be a guide at this point.
Uh huh.
How
Oh
often do
man.
you meet? Yeah, how often do you meet? What do you do? Do you talk in
So
circles every week then? Every week, same topic? What to give me the goods.
man, so the longer we've been open, the more that we meet together. I I think to your point that meetings can be completely worthless if there's not a really specific agenda.
Yeah.
I think the principle behind this that you have to believe as a business owner is that there will constantly be problems that you have to solve. And I think that in my brain, I think, well, I'll just type this operations manual and then I can just go back to working out. And I think as a business owner, you have to develop a taste for having problems. And so I think the real reason that you meet as a staff is to solve problems like right then and there. There's a great book by a guy named Gino Wickham. It's called Traction, and he calls it IDS, or identify, discuss, and solve. And so once a week, we get together as a staff. Everybody goes around and says, "Hey, this is what I'm focused on professionally." And sometimes, we have somebody going through nutrition certification, so they'll say, like, "Yeah, I learned this week." We're like, "Hey, that's cool." They have 60 seconds, so it doesn't drone on.
I'm writing
There's a
this down.
there's a couple other things that we'll um, look at together. Like, almost every membership software will tell you, um, how much revenue you've made for that month. And being in business for
Yeah.
15 years, it's like, at that point in the month, like if you're good, if it's exactly where it should be, or if it's not, you can get through that stuff really quickly. And then the rest of the time is spent clarifying anything that a staff member is confused on, where they'll bring something up in real time, some issue that somebody has, and we solve it. We solve it like right then and there. And that's been so helpful because in years past, I remember not meeting, and then these problems would grow, or
Yep.
we would just sweep them under the rug because they just never got brought up. And then there were like huge dysfunctions that we had to like suffer because of.
Mhm.
And so,
Give me an example of, like, something that's solved now, because here's I think you and I are similar in this sense,
uh,
is that we're idea guys, right? We know that.
yeah,
I can come up with a lot of ideas, but putting the ball in the end zone is the hard part. So when
uh,
it comes to the solving, what kind of thing are we talking about that you can solve right then and there? Because I think that, some of those problems I would assume are not going to be resolved in a 3-minute conversation, but it's going to have to be, hey, Spencer, no, or whatever. Here's the problem. Hey, Spencer, I'm going to need you to do these things by next week. And I'm going to need you to do this and this. And by next week, let's try to have this worked out.
yeah, yeah, totally. And it goes. It's important to say that there's some things that require a special meeting of their own.
Yeah.
And so if something gets brought up and it's like, man, because we schedule a hard 60 for these, and we try to finish faster than 60 every time.
Yeah.
Um, but say it's a big discussion on program design.
Yeah.
We're going to make sure that those that really want to chime in and be involved in that conversation, maybe we go offline and we don't include every single person.
Sure.
But there's a lot of things like, hey, we're going to do Murph. Okay, what day do we want to do Murph? Okay, last year we did it on Saturday. What times? Okay, we're going to do. Okay, boom, done. One of the mistakes with these little things that you can solve is that there needs to be somebody that probably is responsible for it, like when you
Yeah.
finish. And so, my go-to is to just say like, I'll do it, I'll do it, I'll do it, I'll do it, I'll
Oh,
do it.
gosh. Yes.
But that
Yeah.
becomes a real problem. And so most of these things, like when we finish, it's like, okay, who's got this one? And somebody be like, yeah, I got that. I'll take care of it. If there's something that needs to be like actually done. So here's a real world example. Like we had a member that, and I'll just be really honest. She quit, and I think this is really common. Like she said, it was for one reason,
Mm,
and as we talked together as a group, so we brought this up during the IDS portion, and as a group we realized it's probably not just that. It's probably not just the price, but whenever somebody says price, it means okay, they
something
didn't
else.
find the
Yeah.
value that they once
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
And so it opened up this conversation about what we might do differently, and there were some real tangible things that we decided we would just tweak and experiment. And
Yeah.
so um, man, there's lots of weeks where there's very few things that get brought up. And in that case, be like, all right, meeting's over.
Yeah.
But there's been some weeks where something's brought up, we've run out of time, and we realize, like, man, this is something that we seriously need to address.
Yeah.
But over communicating like that with each other, I think has made the coaches really competent. And that may
Yeah.
be one of the best reasons for doing it, because and then I'll shut up. Here's the process of like owning a business is that you're the best artist that the studio has.
Mhm.
And at some point, you have to make a decision. Okay, do I want to be the only one creating these master works of art? Or do I want to try to teach these guys? And so I
Yeah.
think these
It's a great point.
meetings are great ways to not just assume they're good, which I think we all do, but
Yeah.
to allow them a safe platform to say, "Hey, you said that, but I don't really get it." And I can tell you
Yeah.
that's where most of the time is spent. Is like, "Hey, Spencer, you wrote this thing, and I know it makes sense in your brain. I don't understand how you really want me to do this." And
That's great.
that's been humbling for me because I
What
realized
do
like,
you mean?
like man, I'm not quite as good of a communicator as I thought I was. But I think it's just been, yeah, man. I mean, I think that I think that format has just been a really healthy thing on a lot of different fronts.
Yeah, that's great, man. I'm gonna steal that and use it because it's something I've struggled with for sure. Um, which brings me up to
Yes.
my last one, and it's funny because as you were talking, I started kind of thinking through because I didn't really have a third one. I was trying
Yeah.
to what would be, and what should I? One of the things I thought originally that I really had just
Hope you're cutting out a little bit.
as we're having
Oh, there you go.
still weird. Back
Uh-oh. Chopping in and out.
back to zero connection. I I can tell.
I'm hanging on your every word, though. I want to hear what you have to say.
Uh, back? Am I back?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Am I back? Hey. Okay. Great.
Yes.
So at first it goes back to that I'm not good at I don't need this typically, right? Is I need to be better about building our team of trainers and
Mm.
like facilitating either events or meetings or whatever that is to bring us together. Because I'm just not like that. Again, I'm wired to, man, the blessing and the curse, right? Like if I'm at A and I want to be at B, here's the work I need to do in between. You just tell me what to do and I'll put my nose to the grindstone. I don't need that affirmation from you. I'm just gonna like outwork everybody.
Yeah.
um, but so that was kind of the one that I started to think of as like, man, I do think that there is a if we make a conscious effort to build our team, that can be really helpful. But I think even more than that is you said it a second ago. The faster you can learn how to do this as an owner, the better I believe your business will be. And it's the ability to delegate,
So good.
right? So, like, if you embrace the fact that even though whatever those things are that you would like done will probably not be done to the exact specification and standard that you would do, but they are still done well,
Mm-hmm.
that will be so beneficial for you to be able to let go of that because it will give you the time to be able to work on the business more, develop the meeting, get the team building going, fix the program design. I mean, the big moving parts. And then we can start to facilitate others to take care of the back end billing system,
Mm-hmm.
get MRF organized. You know what I mean? All the things that can eat up easily half of your work week.
1,000%. 1,000%. And I think that we're all for good reason. I mean, it's like all of us are anxious control freaks that have a lot of risk and responsibility. It's
Yeah.
like this thing's really important to us, and it's this baby that we've nurtured from infancy, and so there's a lot of pride that goes into it. But the trade-off of somebody doing it less than perfect, but that supports you on this thing that you value so much is a good trade-off. And
Yeah.
and the thing that I tell myself, because I really struggle with this, is hey dude, you're not doing it perfect either. You just care about it more. But that doesn't mean that your execution is flawless either. Just because you wrote in a dumb, moleskin doesn't mean that that plan like came into existence perfectly.
Yeah.
It's like you stumbled through it as well. You just didn't they didn't see all those things that you stumbled through, and or maybe they don't recognize it, but it's like, hey, you're not doing this perfect either, so let
Yeah.
somebody else not do it perfect as well.
It's so true though, right? Because I
Yeah.
think it's so easy to get stuck in that trap of feeling like you have to have your hands in everything. And my
Hmm.
goodness, like I think nothing could be further from the truth. And yeah, you gotta have the right team, that's for sure. But that gets back to the culture. What kind of
Yeah.
culture do you want to create? Like I've had people ask me about training at the gym and I just have a thing where I'm in my head, I'm like, man, I don't think your personality would be a good fit here.
Yeah. Dude, that let's make that a whole episode. It's just the process of hiring and training
Yeah,
somebody, because I think that would be really valuable. But yeah, I
yeah,
mean, that seems so subjective, but it's not, because you know
yeah,
that you can train somebody to coach and do the job like you want to, but it's the intangibles of what you can almost get a whiff of upon,
yeah.
first introduction to somebody, that I think means more than anything else.
It's a cool parallel to that. That is definitely an extreme to it. But I remember talking to Andy Stumpf about this.
Uh-huh.
So Andy, um, he was a Navy SEAL and he was a BUDS instructor, and he was talking about how they have these situations where in BUDS they have these dudes that are absolute machines, and their dream from a, a young kid has been to be a Navy SEAL, and they've done everything to get there. And physically and mentally, they're everything that could be the potential of being a SEAL. But he's like, when it gets down to it, they're not the dude I want standing next to me when my life's on the line. And he said, he's like, we will make those guys quit. We will, like, because I can't have in my life and my guys around me, our life depends on it. So we make them quit. And there are other guys that maybe don't have quite the physical like ability,
Mhm.
but mentally or the intangible, it's like that's the guy I want next to me. They don't make it easy on them, but they're not gonna force them to quit.
I
And I was
wonder.
like, whoa, that's
Yeah,
wild, right?
yeah.
Because it's not just like their physical or mental toughness. There's, I think, that intangible there too.
I wonder how they determine that. Like, I wonder what Andy would say
Yeah.
if he was like, "Yeah, and this is what I mean by I don't want him standing next to me, and here's how I saw that play out in this pretend environment that we, call battle, that's just buds."
That'd be
I
such a
wonder what he
great
would say.
question. That'd be
Yeah.
such a great question to have answered. But anyway, like say I think, on a much smaller scale, who do you want at your shoulder?
Yeah. Talking about, like, seminar staff, Eric Preston one time said, like, "Hey, only bring this staff member on if you feel like you could sit on a 10-hour flight, like, next to this person."
Yes,
Do you remember hearing something the same sentiment? I was like, "Ah,
totally.
that's pretty good. That's a
It's
that's
yeah,
a
there's
pretty good
some
criteria."
validity there for
Yeah.
sure, man. Well, that's
I
great. Yeah, I love
I
it.
got one more,
Oh, give it to me. I want to hear it.
and I think you're gonna love it, because we
I'm
talked a lot
ready.
about this online or offline.
Give me the goods.
Unapologetically run your business.
Oh.
Most of us, and I'll
It's
explain
a
this, you know
big
exactly
ball
what
of
I'm talking
wax,
about.
man.
Most of us started this because we had uh, equal loves of fitness and helping other people. And when we opened the doors, we also created this third space, this community, and this culture that meant a lot to people. And so you have all three of those things, and there's a real altruistic spirit that goes with that, that you really do care and you really do want to help. And so, without any business acumen, you charge what you think is a fair price, and you spend the money you need to on expenses, and you think that's how businesses run. And to deviate from that at all makes you feel guilty. It makes you feel like you don't really care about the welfare of your members. You could also argue that you don't care about the welfare of your coaches, because you're not, um, if you do anything besides that, thinking of their income as the most important thing. But here's the principle, that that's not how business works. And that's taken me 12 years
Ah,
to really understand that. In that, the way that I was approaching it, it would be like if you had this baby And as a baby, you say, you know what? This kid will survive if he gets 4 hours of sleep, which is true. The kid will survive if he gets 4 hours of
Yeah.
sleep. But we know that a baby needs like 13 hours of sleep to not be a pile of crap the next day and to actually grow and develop physically, cognitively, like it needs
Yeah.
to, so it can be this functioning human being for society. And I think with our business, we say, all we need is 4 hours of sleep. I just need to generate revenue, pay the expenses. That's it. And the real recipe is like, no, you need a profit margin, and it's not because you're greedy. It's because it's just the way that business works. And I think that's like
Yeah.
such a hard lesson for all of us to appreciate, because
Yeah.
psychologically it seems like you're turning into a person that doesn't care about people, when in
Mhm.
fact it's like the only way to care for them long term.
Oh gosh, I couldn't agree more. And it's still something I struggle to the core with to this day. Like I have been in the process of trying to decide if we should raise our rates. Like, guess what? It's so I feel so like you said, I feel so guilty saying this, and I
Yeah.
shouldn't. I shouldn't. But like inflation's a real thing.
Hmm.
And like my gas and electric bill have gone way up. And guess what? Like that is a piece of it. And I look at
Yeah.
um just the just what's happened in the past from the last time we raised our rates, which was like I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, and we hadn't raised them for almost 10 years, man, like, up to that point. Um, and, like, I was thinking about this the other day that
Hmm.
there's a guy in here, he's a CEO of a company, and he said every year they meet with their employees and they talk about a 2% increase for their wages
Yeah.
because that's just what happens in the economy.
Hmm.
Is like they have to cover their cost of living. And his conversation was how this year it had to be closer to 6 or 8% because of just the dynamic of the economy around here. And then I start to look at other facilities and I'm like, wait, they're charging what? That's way more per class than we are, and the service that we provide is so much better.
Hmm.
But I still feel so guilty
And
to
I thought about this a lot.
man.
Yeah, I think it's because we're still the boots on the ground in some
Yeah.
aspects.
Yeah.
If you and I were serial entrepreneurs and we had 10 businesses, we wouldn't have that luxury of to be in there, like seeing these people day in and day out. And so we would look at the numbers and we would make decisions based on like how business works. So I
Like,
think some of the
what's the
right,
health of the business?
right.
Because to your point, like, I think it's so easy to get tripped up in saying, like, "I feel bad about doing this and this," but the reality is we need to be running a healthy business. Because if
Yeah,
the business doesn't exist, then it's not there for anybody. Not just
yeah,
you as the owner, but it's not there for the trainer, it's not there for all of your members. It doesn't exist.
yeah. You and I have talked about that. Like ethically, it needs to be good for uh, the members, it needs to be good for the coach, and it needs to be good for the business, i.e., the person who owns the business. But it's greater than that. I like to remind my crew, it's like, hey, this is the profit margin which we go over every month. This isn't going into my pocket. Like this is how I
Yeah.
pay myself, but it's also the way that we um, provide free shirts for people, or change equipment, or this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think that it's like so backwards with what it is that we're doing. It's like we put ourselves last. And I'm not
Yeah.
saying that you need to put yourself first. It just needs to be, like you said, it just needs to be equitable. It needs to be balanced. It needs to be like
Yeah.
all three of those things. Like, and that's a juggling act, because I think that you can. Here's an example of where it benefits the members and it benefits the business, but it doesn't benefit the coaches. Is like a big box gym where it's like they're Equinox. They charge $120 an hour, and the coach gets $20, I think, if you're
Oh,
starting out, and
good
with
golly. Yeah.
more tenure, that price goes up. Like that's unethical.
Yeah.
Like that's not an equally yoked system. So I
Yeah.
think there's lots of ways where
Or vice versa. right?
Mhm.
It could be said the opposite.
Oh,
Or,
yeah.
hey, if you guys are at gym and you feel bad, and you're like, no, 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 like, just do your one-on-ones like, you just take all of it.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my goodness, like, hey guys, just so you know, like you're the one that still has to pay to keep the lights on, get the equipment, and it only gets more complicated. I think, as we've had, more things come in the gym and more opportunities, and like kids classes come in and separate stuff. Now you've got 30 kids rolling in the door, and they're all teenagers, and they're standing on the Echo bike with one pedal, and it's like throwing hot dogs on the assault runner, and it's like you just like there's a cost to those things to you guys to maintain that. So and to that point, what you said earlier, where I think one of the coolest things to see is a thriving business and owner that is incredibly successful and still serves their members and their trainers. So don't get confused in thinking that just because you're successful, and whether, well, let's label it financially, right?
Mhm.
Because it's a healthy business, that
Mhm.
you can't serve those around you. The coolest thing is to see, I think, someone that's incredibly successful with running a business, and they still do the things to serve their clients and their employees.
Yeah, and, like, without any grudges. Because
Yeah.
I think you
Yeah,
can get
yeah.
really jaded if and here's how this will play out if you're listening to this and it's like, "I just can't do it." You'll do this so long that something that you'll have to compromise in some way and you'll suffer because of it. And then if you're still coaching and you're still involved in the business, that's really hard for people not to pick up on. And then
Mhm.
this thing that you wanted, you actually can't do because this really special environment and culture that you've created, you are now the poison that
Yep.
is in there because like you thought you had to sacrifice in a way that like it actually long term doesn't serve your members well, which is like
Yes.
this weird paradox.
Agreed. Totally agree.
There's a business that I got asked to weigh in on. It's a CrossFit gym that wants to be sold. And if you went into the gym, you would see happy members, you would see happy coaches. But as you distance yourself from that and you just look at the numbers, they haven't made any profit
Mhm.
in 3 years. And so here's the tricky part: the owner that wants to sell wonders how much it's worth.
Oh, this breaks my heart, dude.
And the answer is, and you could argue this,
0.
the answer is it's not worth very much.
Oh, and
It's
you
not
know
worth
why
very
it
much.
breaks my heart is because that's has been me
Yeah.
until about a year ago when I
It's
started to make those changes. And I'm still
it's been
not there
all
yet,
of
but
us, man.
it's
Yeah.
progressing, and I fully own that.
Yeah.
I have regret in that, because I think I could have run things so much better, but I don't have shame in that. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like
Mhm.
I have no problem saying that to the entire community, whether we have one person listen to this or I shouted it, on the games floor. It's like, let's just be real, man.
Yeah.
How many gyms out there how many really took that approach? And I think it goes back to what we said earlier. I think the ones that have really legitimately done well for themselves, for the member, the client, the trainer, right? Or the owner, um, the ones that have really done well for all those facets financially, almost always are the ones that, like me, it's easy to go in and train and put in the hard work. For
Mhm.
those people, it's easy to get to business and make the decisions and crunch the number sheets. I'm not wired like that.
Yeah.
I'm just not. So I have to have help, and I have to have accountability there to do it.
I think in this really niche industry of CrossFit gyms, I think it's really unusual that you would go in with like that set of optics.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I think it's really encouraging to hear you say that. And also it's me too. And I think that for both of us, we got to this point where it's like, this isn't working.
Yeah.
And so anybody that's hearing this, you have one of two choices. You can deceive yourself into thinking that you can somehow figure this out otherwise, or you can just embrace. And here's an encouraging thought: that your members long term will respect you more for doing something that's really hard like this.
Yes.
And anybody that doesn't has no idea what they're talking about.
Oh my gosh. It's just
Because
so it's so true though.
you have, small
Ah,
business owners in your gym, and like we do too. And when somebody says something that I just know like they don't understand what they're saying,
yeah.
I'll go up to one of those guys and be like,
Did you just
"Is like,
did you
am I wrong here?" And they're like, "No, dude, no, you're good, you're good." It's like, okay, okay,
I know.
yeah,
And I read something, I forget, I think it was maybe a Donald Miller book, and it was talking about stop trying to be liked and start trying to be respected.
and that's
Because if
hard
you're
too, man.
oh,
I mean,
because
that's
eventually if you're respected, you will be liked, but
yeah,
maybe not by all, right? Like I know I have made decisions in the past 6 months that I know people look at me differently.
mm,
I know it. And it's not because I was trying to just put money in my pocket. It's because I'm trying to be able to do this long term for everyone. And I know people are still in a position where they do not respect or like what I did. But the alternative was that I was going to sweep it under the rug and act like everything was fine. And we're building this thing on a deck of cards and big gust of wind blows, whether it's tomorrow or 5, 10 years from now, and the whole thing topples down.
yeah. And here's the fundamental difference: as we start this, we do something that does endear people to us. So if you're a people pleaser like me,
Yeah.
then you get all of these hits, these tiny little hits that people are really pleased with what you're doing. And so you get this false sense of belief that the coaches are your friends, that the members are your friends, but you forget that you're providing a service for them.
That was the most helpful thing you told me.
Oh man. And you realize what made me think this is that when you make decisions that just need to be made, you do gain respect, but you probably do decrease your popularity. You might even decrease the number of friendships,
Oh, yeah,
but it's still the right thing to do. And so I
man.
think the journey of an entrepreneur is a little bit more lonely than people realize.
Yeah, totally.
But
Wow. It's
the
like
thing that
so true.
it's true.
It
Um,
is. It is. It's I think it's super true. I think it would be of anybody. I think if you asked Elon Musk the same thing, he would say the same thing.
yeah. I
No,
mean,
I really
probably
do.
100 times more than what we're
Oh,
saying.
oh yeah. I mean, yeah. Gosh, such good stuff. I just think, man,
I was
hopefully
encouraged by it.
me too. Hopefully some of you guys listen to this. We've gotten questions. I've had questions about putting this on iTunes or Spotify. Okay, so here's the deal, guys. Know your strengths and weaknesses. I don't know how to do that, and I feel like I don't have the time to do that. But if someone out there is like a ninja at that, and you want to help us put this on
We'll hire
iTunes
you.
for free,
We'll
work for
pay
free.
we'll pay
We
you.
can't do that. We can't do that because we do this for free, Spencer.
We'll figure out a
Remember?
way.
Yeah, we'll
We'll
find a
figure out a
way.
way.
But if you guys know how to do that, if you know how to easily put this stuff on iTunes or Spotify or Podbeam or Podcast or MapQuest Extraordinaire, whatever's out there, like let us know and we're all ears if there's an easy way
Mhm.
to do it. Because I do think this stuff is valuable. I think it needs to get out there. And if it's easier for people to listen to it on iTunes instead of stare at my ugly face, I'm okay with it.
Yeah. Not stare at you over the face, but get it on iTunes.
Yeah,
Next
totally.
week, let's talk about um, how to hire and bring a coach up.
I'm in because
Okay.
we're doing it now.
Yeah. Awesome. Can't wait to hear.
All righty.
All right, man.